Some voices were never supposed to leave this soon.
And let me blow your mind.
They gave the world timeless music, changed R&B forever.
Listen, 2,000 miles.
And then suddenly, they were gone. Behind the fame were stories filled with heartbreak, pressure, addiction, and unfinished dreams. Tonight on Beyond the Beat, we uncovered 10 R&B legends who died too soon. And the tragic stories that still haunt music history. Number 10, Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman had a voice that sounded like midnight heartbreak. Deep, elegant, and painfully emotional. She could turn almost any lyric into something devastatingly real. During the late 70s and 80s, she became one of R&B's most respected vocalists, blending jazz, soul, and quiet storm into a sound that felt timeless. But behind the spotlight, Hyman battled depression for years. The industry praised her talent, while often ignoring her pain. Record label pressure, personal struggles, and emotional isolation slowly consumed her. Friends described someone who could light up a room publicly while suffering privately. Then came 1995, just before a scheduled performance at the Apollo Theater. Phyllis Hyman died by suicide at only 45 years old. The news stunned the music world, because suddenly, songs that once sounded romantic carried a different weight. Fans began hearing loneliness hidden between the notes. And tragically, her story would not be the last time R&B lost a powerful voice far too soon. Number 9, Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass was more than a singer.
Let me rub your back where you say it's sore.
He was an event. By the late 70s, his concerts felt electric. Women screamed before he even touched the microphone. His deep,
And let me blow your mind.
commanding voice transformed slow jams
I've waited all day long.
into emotional experiences that defined an era of soul music.
Come on, get closer and closer.
But in 1982, everything changed in seconds.
I've waited all
While driving through Philadelphia,
plenty good love.
Pendergrass lost control of his Rolls-Royce and crashed into a tree.
Just to hold you
The accident left him permanently paralyzed from the chest down.
so close to me. Let's get lost
For many artists, that would have ended everything. But Teddy refused to disappear.
all day long. Just
He returned to music, performed again, and became a symbol of resilience.
loving all through the night. And then again, and
Yet the emotional and physical toll never fully left him.
in my arms. And
Years of health complications followed until his death in 2010.
lost in each other.
What makes Teddy's story so heartbreaking is not just the tragedy itself.
Hold you in my arms.
It is knowing how unstoppable he once seemed, and somehow,
And again when the morning comes.
the next artist's death shocked the world even more.
In my arms.
because it happened at the exact moment his career was exploding. Number 8. Otis Redding. Otis Redding did not sing songs.
On the dock of the bay, watching.
He unleashed emotion, raw, powerful, and completely authentic.
So I guess I'll remain the same.
Otis became one of the defining voices of soul music during the 1960s.
I'm sitting on the dock of the bay.
Hits like Try a Little Tenderness made him a star,
Sitting on the dock of the bay.
but it felt like he was only beginning to reach his full potential.
The tide rolled away.
Then came December 1967. At just 26 years old,
Sitting here resting my bones.
Redding boarded a small plane headed toward Wisconsin. The aircraft
Wasting time.
crashed into a freezing lake, killing him and most of the Bar-Kays members traveling with him. The timing made the tragedy even more devastating.
I'm sitting on the dock of the bay.
Only days earlier, Otis had recorded Sit On, the Dock of the Bay,
And this loneliness won't leave me alone.
the song that would become his biggest hit after his death. There is something haunting about that record now. The whistling, the stillness, the feeling that a man exhausted by fame
I left my home in Georgia,
was searching for peace he would never fully find. And somehow,
wasting time.
even that loss would not prepare R&B fans for the tragedies still ahead. Number 7, Aaliyah. Aaliyah changed R&B by sounding effortless.
Driving me crazy. I don't know.
Cool without trying. Smooth without forcing it.
Yeah. Said I've been eating. Won't take it.
By the early 2000s, she was no longer just a singer. She was becoming an actress, fashion icon, and cultural phenomenon.
Calling for you. 'Cause it
Her future looked limitless. Then came August 25th,
what to do. I'm just wondering if you still
2001. After filming a music video in the Bahamas,
baby. Yeah.
Aaliyah boarded a small, overloaded plane that crashed moments after takeoff. She was only 22 years old. The shock was enormous because Aaliyah represented the future of R&B.
Yeah, I don't wanna let you know that
Her sound influenced an entire generation of artists who came after her.
is your heart still mine? No, crossing time.
Even now, modern alternative R&B still carries traces of her style. What makes her death feel especially tragic is how much remained unfinished.
Said I've been needing you. Ooh,
Movies, albums, evolution.
that is killing me. I know you got another life.
Fans still wonder what Aaliyah would have become if she had lived longer.
I miss you. It's been too long and I'm lost with
But the next story takes us into even darker territory. Because this artist's death remains surrounded by mystery decades later.
Real me, honest you do.
Number 6, Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke helped invent modern soul music.
I know you send me
Without him, R&B as we know it might not exist.
honest you do. Whoa, I know.
His voice carried warmth and elegance.
Now I find myself
But beneath that smoothness was an artist becoming increasingly aware
at
of racial injustice and his own cultural power.
I know you.
Songs Like a Change is going to come proved he was evolving into something even greater.
I know.
Then, in December 1964,
Self wanting to marry you.
Sam Cooke was shot and killed inside a Los Angeles motel.
First I thought it was infatuation.
He was only 33 years old. Official reports ruled the death
Send me honest to do.
a justifiable homicide after an altercation with the motel manager.
When you hold me, whoa,
But almost immediately, questions emerged. Fans, friends,
and take you home. I know.
and fellow musicians doubted parts of the story. To this day,
But ooh, it's lasted so.
speculation surrounds what truly happened that night. And maybe that uncertainty is part of why Sam Cooke's death still feels unfinished.
Whenever you kiss me,
Because it did not just take away a star.
send me.
It took away an artist who was beginning to change American music forever.
First I thought it was infatuation.
And heartbreakingly, the next legend would also leave the world
When you hold me, whoa,
while trying to rebuild himself emotionally and creatively.
There's a lot of people going naked, naked.
Number 5, Donny Hathaway.
Hey, 'cause we need,
Donny Hathaway sang like a man carrying invisible weight.
we need you.
His music felt deeply human, full of vulnerability, warmth,
Has gotten out of hand.
and emotional honesty. Collaborations with Roberta Flack created some of the most beautiful duets ever recorded. But Hathaway quietly struggled with severe mental illness for years.
Right now.
At a time when mental health conversations were rare, he often battled alone while continuing to perform and record.
They ain't even got clothes.
Friends described moments where he seemed overwhelmed by paranoia
Say we need you.
and emotional exhaustion. Then in 1979,
I said we need.
Hathaway fell from a hotel room window in New York City. He was only 33.
With his evil ways, yeah.
The tragedy sent shockwaves through the music industry because so many people believed his greatest work
Put on that beat.
was still ahead of him. And that feeling of unfinished brilliance
Right now.
becomes even heavier as we move closer to the top of this list.
Need you. Yes, we do. We need you.
Because the next artist died just as she was redefining modern soul music forever. Number 4, Amy Winehouse. Amy Winehouse sounded like old school Soul Reborn. Her voice carried echoes of jazz, Motown, and heartbreak all at once. Albums like Back to Black transformed her into one of the most celebrated artists of her generation. But fame consumed her almost as quickly as success arrived. Every public mistake became tabloid entertainment. Every struggle became a headline. Addiction, media pressure, and constant scrutiny followed her everywhere. In July 2011, Amy Winehouse died from alcohol poisoning at just 27 years old. The world mourned not only her death, but the way it unfolded so publicly. Because beneath the controversy was extraordinary talent, a voice capable of reviving soul music for an entirely new generation. And the next artist's death would feel even more surreal.
We only said goodbye.
Because millions watched his pain happen in real time.
If I could get another.
Number 3, Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross made romance sound effortless.
He left a dollar.
His voice was smooth, comforting, and instantly recognizable.
To dance with my father.
For decades, he dominated Quiet Storm radio
A chance, another walk.
and became one of the defining voices of adult R&B.
And my mother would disagree.
But behind the scenes, Luther battled health issues for years.
Under my sheet, never dreamed.
Weight struggles, diabetes, hypertension, and exhaustion slowly affected his body.
Again.
Then in 2003, he suffered a severe stroke
Another dance with him.
that left fans terrified for his future. Though he briefly returned to the spotlight,
To get my way out.
his health continued declining until his death in 2005 at age 54.
That he would be gone from me.
For fans, it felt impossible. Luther's voice had become part of everyday life.
Sometimes I'd listen outside her door.
Weddings, heartbreaks, slow dances, family cookouts.
I'd play a song that would never.
He felt permanent, and perhaps that is why his passing hurt so deeply.
I would run from her to him.
But the top 2 stories on this list are not just tragic.
If I could still.
They changed music history forever.
And
Number 2, Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston possessed one of the greatest voices ever recorded.
bittersweet.
Not just in R&B, in music history. Her rise during the 1980s and 90s felt unstoppable. Hit after hit turned Whitney into a global icon whose voice seemed almost supernatural.
We'll always
But fame came with pressure few people could survive. Personal struggles,
memories.
addiction, public scrutiny,
We'll always love you.
and years of emotional exhaustion slowly chipped away at her image and health. The media often treated her downfall like spectacle rather than tragedy.
Love you.
Then came February 11th, 2012.
That is all I'm taking.
Whitney Houston was found dead inside a Beverly Hills hotel bathtub just hours before a Grammy party. The world stopped because suddenly the voice that once sounded invincible felt painfully human
We'll always
and devastatingly. The number 1 artist on this list left behind
with me.
not only unfinished music,
Always love you.
but one of the darkest family tragedies in entertainment history. Number 1, Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye did not just sing about pain. He lived inside it. From What's Going On to Mercy, Mercy Me. Marvin transformed soul music into something spiritual, political, and deeply personal. His records sounded like conversations with humanity itself. But behind the brilliance was chaos, depression, addiction, financial pressure, emotional conflict, and perhaps most painfully, a deeply troubled relationship with his father. On April 1st,
Let's get it on.
1984, after an argument inside the family home in Los Angeles, Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his own father, one day before his 45th birthday. The tragedy felt almost unreal. A man whose music brought healing to millions died in one of the most heartbreaking ways imaginable. And what makes Marvin's death so devastating decades later is knowing how much more he still had to say. Because artists like Marvin Gaye do not simply entertain. They help people survive. These artists left behind more than hit songs. They left behind pieces of themselves. Pain, hope, vulnerability, beauty. And even though their lives ended far too soon, their voices continue to echo through
And let me blow your mind.
every generation of R&B that followed. So now we ask you,
Listen, 2,000 miles.
which loss hit you the hardest? And which R&B legend do you still wish had more time? Subscribe to Beyond the Beat for more deep stories behind the music.
Is your heart still mine? No. Crossing time.
Because sometimes the songs we remember most come from artists we lost too early.